This video will briefly describe examples of thin slice research, which focuses on our super quick impression formation. What are thin slices? Well, we're not talking about pizza slices today. We're discussing a process by which people form judgments of others after observing them for a very brief period of time. In other words, thin slice judgments are judging a book by its cover after only briefly glancing at the cover. Usually these studies include observations that last less than 5 minutes, but research has found that we can form judgments of someone after being exposed to them for only 1/20th of a second. Judgments made under this very brief time constraint are no different than judgments made by people who did not have that brief time constraint. What do we make judgments about? All sorts of things, really. We make judgments about how much we would like that person or trust that person. We make judgments about people's competence, dominance, trustworthiness, warmth, how nervous they are, even how polite they are. We make judgments about people's job performance, and so we might make a judgment about how high a teacher's end of semester evaluations might be. We even make judgments about people's sexual orientation. When we ask people to report why they formed a particular impression of another person, they're usually not very good at answering that question. The truth is, people pick up on nonverbal behaviors such as smiling, eye contact, stiff posture, things like that. And those nonverbal behaviors allow us to form impressions of others, even if we're not aware that we even notice those nonverbal behaviors. We know that people form impressions of others, and they do so very quickly. But do our judgments predict how people actually behave? In one study, participants looked at college yearbook photos of people who would later become the head lawyers of top American law firms. Participants were asked to look at the photos and judge, how powerful is this person? Judgments of the person's power in the yearbook photo were positively related to how much that person made 10 to 50 years after college. In another study, couples were videotaped having a discussion, and then strangers were asked to watch the first 3 minutes of the discussion and report how much positive and negative emotion was displayed in those first 3 minutes. Those strangers' judgments of positive and negative emotional displays, those judgments predicted which couples were divorced 6 years later. In another study, participants were given a task that is just like what you see on your screen. They were shown a picture of 2 political candidates, and they were asked to select the candidate that is more competent. The candidate judged competent most often won the election over 2/3 of the time. People only saw the photo for 1 second before making their judgments, but they were still pretty good at predicting who would win the election. People's judgments were just as good at predicting election outcomes if they judged the photos after 1/4 of a second than if they were given an unlimited amount of time to make their judgments. So we know that our judgments of powerfulness and competence can predict who will earn a lot of money later in life or who will win elections. But do we know if those people are actually more powerful and more competent? In other words, are our judgments accurate? To answer this question, a team of researchers decided to test how well people could judge another person's sexual orientation. People were asked to guess the sexual orientation of 90 different men. The men were pictured in black and white headshots that were cropped. They were all cropped similarly. They were not wearing any glasses. There was no facial hair. They looked like the picture on the screen. Half of the men pictured were straight, and the other half of the men pictured were gay. People were able, all they did was push a button if they thought the person was gay, push another button if they thought the person was straight. And people were able to detect strangers' sexual orientation above chance levels even when the photos were only shown for a 20th of a second. I want to show you a quick demonstration of how quickly people were able to make those judgments. And so watch your screen. If you blink, you'll miss it. So keep your eyes on it and I'll show you how quick this task happened for them. Here we go. Quick, huh? It's amazing that the majority of participants were able to make an accurate judgment after such a brief exposure to the photo. So the answer is yes. Thin slice judgments have been found to be accurate in a variety of areas. Strangers' judgments of another person match up to that person's ratings of themselves. People's judgments about how well a teacher will be rated at the end of the semester match up pretty well to students' end of the semester ratings of that teacher. People's perceptions of salesperson's trustworthiness, a medical student's report, an interviewer's impressions of job candidates, as well as students' judgments of their supervisors, all seem to be pretty accurate. So we hear that judging a book by its cover is a bad thing, but research suggests that these types of judgments can in fact lead us to accurate conclusions. Why do we make such quick judgments and do it so well? Some have suggested that the ability helped our ancestors. If we could quickly identify threats in our environment, we could respond quickly and live. If we could quickly identify who would make a good partner and who would be a good leader, those would also help us survive. No matter the reason for this ability, research suggests that not only do we make very quick judgments of other people, but they're pretty accurate.